Do you believe in the devil? It's a question that ministers get more frequently than I would have guessed before I went to seminary. And I'll be honest, I don't really love the question itself. First of all, the word believe in the setting of the church means to trust, to obey, to follow, to rely on. And so right off the bat, the answer is no, we don't believe in the devil. If you were to phrase the question as, do you think the devil exists? Well, that's a bit more of an interesting question. And then, of course, we would have to spend a little bit of time defining what we mean by the devil. Are we talking about that Faustian image of the devil with the horns and the tail and the pitchfork surrounded by fire? Then no. I don't think many of us in the modern Presbyterian church would say that we believe in the devil as a creature lurking in the shadows making deals for people's souls. It all sounds rather silly to us in our post-scientific, post-enlightenment kind of ideology, but we still do struggle to put language on what really drives the question in the first place. And that is, of course, the presence of evil. What is evil? And where does it come from? If God created the world and called it good, then why is it so bad in so many different ways? Is it really because Adam took that bite of an apple and thus caused the fall of humanity and introduced sin into the world again? That seems a little silly to us in our scientific minds. So what is evil? Do you believe in the devil? Our gospel lesson for this morning from the Gospel of Luke is the story of Jesus' temptation in the wilderness. It begins this way. Jesus, full of the Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit in the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tested by the devil. During those 40 days he ate nothing, and when he was truly famished, the devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread." And Jesus answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone." So then the devil took him and showed him all of the kingdoms of the earth and offered Jesus the opportunity to rule over all creation if only Jesus would bow down and worship him. And Jesus answered, "It is written, worship the Lord your God and serve only him." Finally, the devil takes Jesus and places him at the pinnacle of the temple and says, "Hey, if you are who you say you are, then jump and see if the angels save you." To which Jesus responds, "It is said, do not put the Lord your God to the test." Three temptations: to break his fast, to focus on earthly desires rather than on spiritual needs, to embrace power and money and wealth, to embrace greed over everything else, to test God the Father. You see, to jump from the pinnacle of the temple would not have been an act of faith, but rather it would have been a symbol of doubt. For you don't need to test something if you already know that it works. You only need to test something if you are concerned that it might not function. The remarkable thing about Jesus and these temptations is not that Jesus was able to resist. We expect nothing less from the Son of God. What is remarkable about these temptations is their commonality to the human experience. We may not be able to turn a stone into bread, but we work awfully hard to fill our gluttonous needs. We may not be offered the opportunity to rule the entire world, but power is power, and let's be honest, we are taught from a very young age to strive for more power and more authority and more control. We may not be willing to throw ourselves down from the pinnacle of the temple, but we constantly test God. We barter with God in prayer. We dare God to enter into our lives and enter into the world. We beg for a sign that all of this is real. Temptation is all around us, and it takes a variety of forms in our lives. I don't need to list all of those forms this morning. You know what the temptations are. But the question is, where does it really come from? What causes us to seek to undermine the sovereignty of God, to place our trust in the world and in ourselves? What causes us to seek so much power and so much authority and to step on others in the pursuit of it? Listen, if you need to acknowledge the existence of a personified devil and detached evil spirits for your theology to work, then there is plenty of biblical evidence to support that thinking, so you are on solid ground. But for just a moment, I'd like to say why that line of thinking might be problematic, and then to present an alternate possibility. First, the alternate possibility, and that is this: that evil comes from one place and one place only, and that is us. God created us good, and one of the best gifts that God gave us was the gift of free will, the ability to make decisions for ourselves, to choose what path we are going to follow, to laugh and to love and to make mistakes, and then to try to fix those mistakes. And that gift of free will has led to beautiful acts of love and of service and of kindness and of sacrifice. Unfortunately, that free will has also led to despicable acts of malice and of cowardice and of abuse and of discrimination. And over time, millions upon millions of good choices made by human beings have come together to build incredible systems of justice and mercy in the world, while simultaneously, millions upon millions of bad choices have come together made by human beings to build horrific systems of oppression and of violence. And perhaps it is those systems that Paul was referring to when he talked about the powers and the principalities of this world. So it's us in this line of thinking. We are the problem. There is a spiritual battle that is raging, just like Paul says that there is, but the spiritual battle that is raging is within us, in that way of thinking. Now, as I said, I have no problem theologically with anyone who believes in the devil. There are days when it is awfully hard not to believe in that. But here's my word of caution with that line of thinking. You have heard the quote, "The greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world that he didn't exist." Maybe. But the other possibility is that the greatest trick humanity ever pulled was convincing ourselves that the devil does exist. And therefore, like Pontius Pilate, washing our hands of the consequences of any of our actions. That line of thinking might lead one to say the world is the way it is because of evil systems created by evil spirits. We just try to do our best until God comes and rescues us from the ruler of this world. We resist temptation as much as we can. Sometimes we do give in, but we try, and that's okay because it's not really us. It's them. It's the devil and his followers. It is a cruel world run by the devil, and so we have to fill our storage bins with grain and stockpile our money and hedge our bets if we are going to survive. You see the problem. with that line of thinking. On this first Sunday in Lent, it is vitally important for us to begin the journey with the simple acknowledgement that it is us, that we are the problem. Collectively, from the first humans who came out of the cave until now, we have been ruinous to God's creation, to nature, and to humanity. We have created systems with few in power and many starving. We have created systems in which we feel trapped in a cycle of sin that makes us feel empty and lost, even as we succeed by human standards. It is that acknowledgement that places us on our knees before the throne of God, that causes us to pray, "Create in me a clean heart, O God." Now here's the good news. The good news is that God does not leave us on our knees before the throne. And that is why this story of the temptation is so important. It's because of him, because of his life and his death and his resurrection, because he conquered the forces of evil, whatever they may be, in the world, and he showed us how to do the same thing. We are not powerless against the powers and the principalities of this world because of Jesus Christ. Because of him, we see those powers and principalities for what they are. Dr. Sue Garrett, who is the professor of New Testament at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, wrote this: "United to Christ through the Spirit, we are now freed from bondage to the powers and enabled to resist their corrupting influence. Jesus heals our blindness, enabling us to see the powers for the created and fallen entities that they are." For the created and the fallen entities that they are. The greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world he didn't exist. Or the greatest trick humanity ever played was convincing ourselves the devil does exist. Either one may be true. Both can be well argued. But the first tends to lead to a life of passive resistance and isolation in a world that belongs to another, while the second tends to lead to a life of active responsibility and of action in a world that belongs to God and only to God, but has been placed in our care, like a garden, to be tended. Every decision we make, every decision for empathy, for hospitality, for all of the fruits of the Spirit, adds to the millions and millions of decisions that have been made before us. Every decision that we make for hate and division and bigotry, for violence, for oppression, is added to the millions and the millions that have come before us. The choice is ours, and thus begins the journey of Lent. Amen.